Please enjoy this message from David Arquette sent in by the fabulous Carrie Tenney.
Hey Ryan, how are you? Thanks for doing the Scream podcast.
Like scary movies?
Uh-huh.
What's your favorite scary movie?
I don't know.
You have to have a favorite. What comes to mind?
You are listening to Scream with Ryan C. Showers, the podcast for Scream fans just like you. Join Ryan every week as he takes a deep dive into the horror film series that defined the 90s and redefined the genre. Scream with Ryan C. Showers is your source for scene and quote analysis, character dissections, and the latest news about upcoming installments of the Scary Movie franchise.
I hear you like horror movies, Curly, but do you like them as much as him?
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Scream with Ryan C. Showers. I'm your host, Ryan C. Showers. Thank you for joining me for today's episode. I truly appreciate everybody out there who supports the podcast either by listening every week, supporting me on social media, or subscribing to the Patreon. So if you haven't subscribed to the Patreon of Scream with Ryan C. Showers, there are so many amazing opportunities that come along with this. So in season 6, we're going to be offering what I'm calling 30 Years of Scream, 30 Questions, a Scream with Ryan C. Showers interview. So this will be offered to eligible patrons after 3 months of subscription. You get to come on with me for 30 minutes and have an interview where I ask you 30 speed round questions, but also some deep questions about Scream and your Scream personality and what Scream means to you and how you've also experienced Scream since it's come back to life in the mainstream. That is coming in season 6. Subscribe and you can come on and have a one-on-one with me and celebrate 30 years of Scream for its 30th anniversary. In addition to the interview that's coming in season 6, joining the Patreon gets you access to our community group chats on Instagram. You can come to the group Zooms, which are held quarterly, and the eligibility to come on the podcast with me for main topic episodes by request. Also with the Patreon comes a monthly bonus episode. For most months, I'm going to be releasing an audio commentary of a Scream movie or a Scream-related film. Some months we'll be releasing a group Zoom episode on Patreon that is just released to the Patreon, not the public. I've really enjoyed doing the audio commentaries. I have a library of them at this point. I've done the first 4 Scream films. I've done Halloween. I've done A Nightmare on Elm Street. I've done Halloween H2O. I Know What You Did Last Summer, etc., etc., etc. And I'm so excited to continue doing these as we go into season 6. I need to thank the producers of the podcast. They include TJ Jones, who does all the graphic design work for the episode title cards. I need to thank Ashley Summers, who is my Taylor Swift girl. She helps me with the Taylor Swift song of the week, but also with the Scream game of the week that you can find on Instagram. Usually we post on Wednesday or Thursday mornings, and you can find her at SquirrelandSpud9 on Instagram. And I also need to thank my friend Fernando. He is FN Prescott on Instagram, and he also runs the Isabel May Online Instagram profile. He helps me with posts throughout the week to keep the social media and Scream love alive. I've had many wonderful experiences and adventures with this podcast, including being on the cover of the Wall Street Journal. Back in 2022, I was interviewed by the Wall Street Journal. So crazy. But none of this would be possible without the people who follow me and support me on social media. So if you haven't subscribed to my profiles there, I'm Scream with RCS across social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, etc. Also, if you could please do me a solid and give me 5 stars on Apple or Spotify, that would really go a long way and help me out. In addition, I need to thank the stab investors and daddy ghost faces of Scream with Ryan C. Showers. First, Mama Ghostface, I need to thank Carrie Tenney. I also need to thank daddy ghost faces Corey Wilson, Brett Genovich, and Andrew Dominguez. I need to thank stab investors, including Josh Carr, Amar Karim, Kevin Abner, Allie, Roy Garza, Stevie Shears, P. Dougie05, Gustavo Mora, Mark Vieira, Scream Queens Podcast, both Josh and Justine, Joey Nobarini, aka The Vault, Ryan Not Dying Young, David D, Jess Mariano, Sam Levy, Tamika Jones, Cameron Gasway, Josh Camillari, Ivan Valance, Christian Ranke, and John Cardy. All right, everyone, thank you. Please enjoy the rest of the episode and consider subscribing to the Patreon, and you can come on for your Scream interview. 30 years of Scream, 30 questions. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Scream with Ryan C. Showers. I'm your host, Ryan C. Showers. Thank you for joining me for today's episode. This is like what I'm considering like one of like the last like normal episodes of the podcast of season 5. We still have 2 more to go. The next episode is going to be a group Zoom. It's going to be like half for the public, half for the Patreon, and then we have the big season finale, and it's a nice reflection on both like the time of Scream 7, but also the closure of the characters, Sidney, Gale, and Tatum. So I'm really looking forward to releasing that for everybody. And then we're taking a 3-week hiatus. In that time, I'm going to be re-releasing the final Scream by Joey Valisi. I'm shooting for July 19th. I hope everyone can listen again while I'm not putting out any new episodes over the rest of July. Season 6 will premiere on Sunday, August 2nd, which is Wes Craven's birthday. We love that. We love Wes. Finger snaps for our favorite man. And yeah, I'm excited to kick off the 30 years of Scream, 30 questions, interviews, and just, new topics. And it's going to be a really fun time. So in this episode, I'm calling this Scream 7 Perspectives because it's very cool. We have 2 portions after this one. One of them is my friend Alex, who I would say, even though he ranks like some of the West films higher, I would say he's one of the more radio silence heavy fans in the Patreon. So it's like his perception of Scream 7 versus our friend Sarah Campbell, who is an admin for the Instagram group. We love Sarah Campbell. She, and like her perspective is more so she's a Wes Craven person, So it's just like, what does a radio silence person think and what does a Wes person think of Scream 7? And believe it or not, I actually think people are going to be really surprised by what Sarah and Alex have to say. So, and before that though, we are going to be talking about something very, very spectacular for Scream fans, more so for Taylor fans, but I'm going to make it scream. I'm going to make it scream so hard, you have no idea. So everyone, it has been a wonderful Pride Month here, June of 2026, and some other things have been happening in the month of June. It's hard to believe that we've only had this song in the month of June 2026. Blows my mind. But so before we get to knowing what the Taylor Swift song of the week is, everyone please welcome my intrepid co-host, Ashley. Hey, Ash.
Hi, everybody. It is me, and I am so excited to be here.
Well, Ashley, so this is like so fun because this is like what I'm calling like one of like the last like traditional normal episodes of the season. And by normal, I mean like, we have a big Scream segment, we have a Taylor segment, we may have a little segment here and there, but with that kind of structure and flow, because the next 2 episodes are kind of wild, and then we're taking a break. So I actually think that this is the perfect place to end our Taylor coverage of season 5 for the summer, if that makes sense. So Ashley, please tell everybody, what is the Taylor Swift song of the week?
The Taylor Swift song of the week is pretty exciting. It is I Knew It, I Knew You. This is Taylor's new song that came out recently in June 2026. It was written and produced by Taylor Swift and Jack Antonoff. So everybody who says that Jack was never coming back, I'm so sorry, he did. And this was for Toy Story 5. And it is a beautiful song about reconnecting with, I would just say, an old friend, and friend meaning friend can mean so many different things. And I love this song. I think it's so sweet and like it just feels like a hug. I'm a country girl. Like I live in a country loving area. So I was like, I want to put on my cowboy boots and I want to dance to the song, doing like some 2-step or doing some line dancing. That's what I want to do right now.
Well, and this is so funny because like I feel like this song, it's for Toy Story 5, of course, an original song written for that film. She's probably going to be nominated for the Oscar. She's probably going to win the Oscar for this, which is incredible. And she should. I mean, I've been listening to the song on repeat, but the theme of the song and the message of the song, it hits me so deeply, not only for the way it's portrayed in the film with Jessie and kind of like the message of, and like the arc of the toy Jessie in Toy Story 5, but it's very Scream 7 to me. It is so Scream 7 to me. Like whenever I think of like, it's like, not only is it like really fun to celebrate this really cool thing that Taylor has done by writing a song for Toy Story and returning to her country roots, right? But also just in terms of like wrapping up kind of like this season 5 where we had this huge moment with Scream 7. The way I feel about Scream 7 is very much tied into this song, and we're going to get into it, sure. But, it's so funny to me too. Listen to how Toy Story kind of lines up with Scream. You say eggplant, I can make it about Scream, okay? Toy Story, okay, the first one comes out in 1995, which is the year I was born, but it's a year before Scream. Okay. Then Toy Story 2 comes out in 1999, the year of Scream 3. So these 2 movies exist in the world of the original trilogy. Then comes back again, Toy Story 3, 2010. And what happened right after 2010? Oh, Scream 4 happened. Then Toy Story 4 comes out in 2019, which is when Scream 5 was announced and whenever it was being written and revived and then filmed, whatever. And now we have Toy Story 5 in 2026, which is the same year as Scream 7. So it's just interesting how the spirit of Scream and the spirit of Toy Story are lined up here. So Ashley, thoughts? And if not, tell me what your thoughts are on Toy Story 5.
Yeah, I mean, that's so fun. I didn't know all of that. So amazing. I love that. I love Toy Story 5. I have told everybody on this that I am a sensitive lady. And I cried that entire movie. Oh yeah, I had to put up with a man who had his feet out the entire movie, like bare feet, reclined seat, and I could just see his feet. Luckily I had a glass of wine and I was like not gonna throw popcorn at him. But you know what? Even despite his dogs out, I was able to enjoy this movie thoroughly. I thought it was so sweet. I loved having a Jessie forward story. The main characters were kind of young girls, and I thought it was really sweet, super relatable for me, but I think it would be relatable to anybody. And my number one celebrity crush favorite guy on the planet besides you is in it. Conan O'Brien, who I think had a great role. And then it tops it off with Taylor. I'm like, what? TS? TS? Just love it. And Toy Story is my favorite, like, animated movie for the most part. If like when I think about it, I think that they're probably my favorite. I've always been I just love Woody. I gotta say it. I mean, I like Buzz too, but and all the characters were so sweet. And the girls were like, I like how the girls were like a little bit weird. Like girls like that played like the young girls were kind of goofy and totally themselves. And I think the messaging behind it is really beautiful. And if you have a chance to go to it, I think it's a really fun watch for adults and kids.
First of all, I think it's a very nice film. For me, it doesn't reach the heights of Toy Story 2 and Toy Story 3. Like those are my favorites of the franchise. I do think it's an improvement over 4, but I think I like that it's a very self-contained story and it's very thematic. It's beautiful. The music's beautiful throughout. Of course, like the arc with Jessie realizing something big about a name, we'll just say it that way, that unlocked so many tears. I'd be like, I was involuntarily just blubbering, crying. It was like terrible. So not terrible. It was beautiful because it just hits me so hard. And plus, I knew this song inside and out. I've been listening to the song literally every single day, probably at least 10 to 15 times a day. So the message of the song was already like in my soul. So whenever I got to see it play out in the movie, my heart was ripped open. You know what I mean? So I think that's cool. But the thing I love most about Toy Story 5 is this is very similar to Devil Wears Prada 2, where Devil Wears Prada, the original, a lot of people would say that that's more so just like very much like that mid 2000s like rom-com. I don't want to say chick flick, but like a very like more mainstream kind of comedy. And Devil Wears Prada 2 has an aggressive message. It's talking about the world and society and this specific business and the mergers and tech bros and how that impacts art, And I feel like Toy Story 5 did the same thing with the concept of kids' toys, by talking about technology and kind of arguing with it and wrestling with it and like the impacts on kids. So it's just interesting how strong of a message and cultural theme it explored, despite originating as like a kids movie or a more mainstream kind of story. Like there's a huge power and a huge reason behind it. It's kind of like coming back to Scream 4 with Jill and having a big cultural message behind that. So Ash, any thoughts?
Yeah, and I really like the messaging behind it because like about these toys trying to understand this new world that they're in and the benefits and the like it was really showing people like what the benefits and the major, in my opinion, negative aspects of some aspects of tech are. But at the same time, like it didn't feel too preachy, if that means like being like you could never have a tablet in your life or whatever. But it was really sweet. And one thing like as like you get older and like you watch these movies as an adult, I can't imagine having a kid and watching that movie. Like I think I would have been crying even harder. But one thing I've noticed with like my nephews and all of my friends who have kids is like kids do grow up. It feels so much faster with the access to tech and different things. And I think one of like the most beautiful things about childhood, when you're privileged enough to be able to just be a kid, I really hope that all kids are able to have a childhood where tech isn't the end all be all for them, if that makes sense. I think this messaging is really beautiful where it just shows how human connection is definitely needed.
So let's talk about this flawless song that she wrote. And for the record, this was released 2 weeks before the movie came out, and we got to live with the song by itself before we saw it in the context of the film. And to be honest, the first time I listened in like the first couple of days, I liked it right off the bat. But by like the second or third day is whenever it clicked with me. I think a lot of people, including myself, had expectations of this being like a really sad, almost track 5 ballad. And that's not what this is at all. It's very, very fun. It's country. It's her return to country after a long time just, mostly doing pop. And there's almost like a dance summery vibe to it. So, I mean, it's the perfect time to release it. It's the perfect circumstances. Like all of the pieces align for this song to be, yet another Taylor Swift #1 hit. And it kind of brought back some songwriting that, for people who were disappointed with Life of a Showgirl, which I was not. I love Life of the Showgirl. I love the writing on it. Don't care what you think. But those people did love the writing here, and I have to say, like, I whenever I first listened, I don't know if I was disappointed. It wasn't what I was expecting. And I understood the writing was clear, beautiful. I understood the message, but then like it took like a day or so for me to kind of like put aside my expectation and then just kind of experience the song. And now I can't imagine my life without this song. I know that sounds really silly, but I love this song. Ashley, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I honestly, I feel like I was kind of thinking it would be a little bit more sad, but I wasn't expecting it to be too dramatic. I was definitely like I was kind of picturing something like this, but a little bit deeper, not as like upbeat, if that makes sense. Like I wasn't expecting the instrumental to be as upbeat, but I'm really glad. Like I think because we didn't know for a while that it was like the closing credit. But I think if I would have known that right away, I would have been like, oh, it would be weird to have like a really like, I want to jump off a building because my toy fell in the river song or something. You know what I mean? But I love it. Doesn't it feel like a summer barbecue where like you're looking around and like you see all of your friends and like the sun is like setting like just like at a perfect time and like feels like a light breeze on a summer day when like you just had like the most fun that day. Like this song is just for happiness. And I actually had my birthday party recently, and my oldest friend in the entire world, she always jokes because like she's about like 7 months younger, and I met her when she was like 3 days old. So like we've known each other for a long time, and we haven't seen each other in person in a long time. And I was telling people, oh, I haven't seen Mara in so long. And people were like, that's crazy. Like your bond is like you hang out every single day. And I was like, I honestly started crying after my birthday party, listening to the song for the first time. Cause like, that's what this song is that like bond with a person who you don't have to see them every day, whatever it is, like you guys just connect on a completely different level. And like, I literally have goosebumps, like thinking about it. It's just so sweet, but not like patronizing sweet. Do you know what I mean? Like how some songs are just like, it's like too sweet and it just is like that, like it's like it leaves a bad taste in your mouth, like it's like you're trying to make me sad. And I think like this was just, I love it so much. The more I listen to the song, the more I like it, and it just makes me happy. And I think it's fun to have a happy song, especially during summer.
And it's funny because like you say it's happy, and it is happy. It is a jolly, upbeat, fun song. But at the same time, the lyrics can be seen as, I don't want to say sad, but the whole song is kind of about, like Taylor described it as like a departure, but also a coming home. And, with that, because the way I kind of see the song is like, having this amazing relationship or moment or friendship or bond with somebody, and then having to move on with life, and then getting to return to that bond, and the idea of returning to something that is so beautiful to you, it's really warm. It elicits emotion, happy emotion, even maybe sad emotion. Like I kind of think about this in terms of like my grandpa. I can't tell you how much I've cried during this song, listening to the song, for the happiness, for just like the nostalgia, the reflection of it all, in addition to just being happy and upbeat. And I want to kind of connect this, of course, to Scream. Because, listening to this over and over, and it kind of dawned on me. I was doing an episode recently where I was doing a lot of Sidney stuff and like reflecting on Sidney and getting ready to do like the audio commentary. And it's just crazy to me how much this song kind of lines up with how I see Scream and kind of what the experience of Scream 7 was to me, and kind of getting Sidney back and getting Scream back in a way, like getting our version of Scream back after it had become something different with different characters and a different directing style and setting and vibe and just, filmmaking difference, So, the idea of like Sidney being taken away from us. And then there were a lot of people that thought that Scream 5 should have been the end of Sidney, like that, Sidney saying eventually to Sam, that would have been the last time we ever saw her. And it could have been because Scream 6 happened, but thankfully it wasn't. Whenever I listen to this song and I hear certain lyrics, it really does kind of like make me think of Sidney specifically. Even so, like there are some lyrics here about like the person's smile that she gets to reunite with. And every time I see Sidney smiling, whether that's with Mark or in the coffee shop, I see her. I see see the same woman from 1 to 4. This is a Sidney song to me, you know? I'm just so filled with like the spirit of Sidney and like my relationship with Sidney as a fan, but also my relationship with Scream. It's like no time had passed and we needed her to come back, and she did. And that is the reunion of Scream 7 in Sydney with a lot of us, is this song. So, Ashley, what are your thoughts?
Yes. What I honestly, if I make it like Scream related, what I picture, and y'all are gonna think I'm crazy, but I picture like grown up Sydney, like Scream 7 Sydney, like looking through like a photo album of like different times in her life and seeing a picture of Tatum Riley, like her and Tatum Riley, like just like a really candid, like not necessarily posed picture, like maybe they're even just like in the background of a photo. And like at first you think like she's thinking, I knew what I knew you about Tatum, but then she's really thinking about herself, about like it's almost like reconnecting with like that younger version of yourself. And I think like this song is almost like nostalgia, because it's like nostalgia can feel really, really happy and good, but there's also like this like ache. Do you know what I mean? Like there's like this like ache for like that younger version of yourself, but like you get excited when you see like that like they're making new episodes of the show that you loved growing up, not because you're gonna watch it, because new kids get to experience it or something. The pain that's like in this song, but like in a happy way. And I just like imagine Sydney like venturing back to her younger self and feeling happiness and pride for the first time, versus feeling like pain about what happened there, like remembering a lot of like the happiness that was there besides dating a really stupid boyfriend, even if he had great hair.
And her mom. Like, I mean, I can totally
Yes.
see Sydney like kind of like thinking about Maureen. Oh my God, I'm gonna start crying. Oh my God, I can't even. I can see Sydney thinking about Maureen in this way, in kind of like despite everything she learns about Maureen and Maureen's past being so horrific, and Sydney kind of having to live Maureen's past over the original trilogy. I bet when she sees pictures of Maureen in her house or in photo albums, Sydney has a similar feeling about her mom, like that warmth, nostalgia, where she misses her and she sees, you know, she can remember the light in the window when Maureen was smiling at her, you know, despite all of, you know, the hardship that she went through in relation to her mom. I think that's kind of where she is with Maureen. And we even see that in the Scream 4 deleted scene where Sydney's looking at the picture of Maureen on Kate's mantle and she holds it. And Allison Bree's like, who's that? And Sydney's like, oh, it's my mom. And Rebecca just doesn't give a shit. Like, you know, and so there's a little bit of that there. But Ash?
I love that. And I think as you get older, the mistakes that you think that your parents have made, you realize like, I mean, some of them, like, I'm talking about loving great parents. You realize like your parents are human, and like they did have a past before you, and they could have had mistakes or their own trauma or whatever it is. And I think the first time you realize your parents are normal human beings, like you're just like, oh my gosh, like when I said you suck when I was little, like they thought that probably hurt their feelings, coming from like the most important person in their life telling them like that they hate them or whatever. And I just imagine, especially when Sydney's a mom, having a daughter the same, like a similar age when all of this began, it would be really beautiful to her reflect on all of the amazing things that she loved about her mom. I think that Sydney's also the type of person who would be able to be like, I might not have liked a lot of things that happened or allegedly happened, like with like her mom's behavior before, like at the end, but also like she'd be like, well, like my mom was a person, and like she had a lot that I think she'd have a lot of compassion and empathy for her, and just
Totally.
like love her to bits. And I think she'd wish that she was around, obviously.
I love everything you just said, because I think that is what Sydney felt, and we've never really gotten to see her talk about it or display that in a Scream movie, except for the Scream 4 deleted scene post Scream 3, right, where she's, you know, because like the original trilogy, she's wrestling with the past and she's trying to defend her mom, but she's also kind of like just like shell shocked. She wants to know, and like, she gets resolution with that at the end of Scream 3, right? But in Scream 4, I think it was a huge mistake to cut that moment where she's holding the photograph. Like that's so, gosh, you know. I want to just kind of like, before we go into the lyrics, which again, I'm going to tie to Scream like, you know, wedding rings in a knot. But I watched Scream 5 recently from start to finish, and I felt so empty as it pertained to Sydney, you know, and it's just interesting watching Scream 5 after going through a year of Scream 7 build up and release, but also just watching Scream 7 kind of like nonstop from February through now. And then going from living in Scream 7 world to Scream 5 Sydney, I don't want to say it felt like a different character, because it's still the same character, but she felt so hollow. She felt so limited, not by any fault of Nev Campbell, but just the writing and the direction Radio Silence was taking with the story. I know that a lot of people love her in 5, and I do think she's a nice part of 5, but she doesn't even get like a real moment to herself, you know, in Scream 5, and that's a bummer to me. That really makes me sad. So when you have that, and when you have Gale Weathers, who everything I just said about Sydney, you can kind of feel in Gale, except Gale does get a big moment. She gets the phone call and the big chase in her apartment. But otherwise, the Gale Weathers we see in Scream 6 is not the Gale Weathers that we know. Part of like what makes Scream 7 so magical is it is this song. It is I Knew It, I Knew You, where it's like the Sidney and Gale that we knew from the Wes era. And I guess I would count Gale in 5 in here too, because I think she's great in 5. But then like, we have a movie where they don't feel like themselves. There's a lot of time that passes and then we get to reunite with them. So it's almost like a double reunion in a way. We reunite with like the true essence and the true soul of the character. I think that like Scream 7 restored the souls of both Sidney and of Gale. I think that they were in Screams 5 and 6, but perhaps their soul wasn't there in the same way. So I think like you could look at it as a reunion of like the real spirit of those characters, but also just getting to reunite with them, getting to reunite with Sidney after not having her for a film, getting to reunite with Gale after where she wasn't even really that important to Scream 6. I love that, and it makes me so happy because I talked to so many people, and everyone pretty much agrees that Sidney and Gale are top form in Scream 7. Right, these are probably like in the top 3 performances of the 7 films for both of these women. And I think that like that magic is so important to the legacy of Scream 7 and this context of I Knew It, I Knew You with them. And I will say it kind of makes me sad that we'll never get the same thing with Dewey because, it's sad to me that the last time we saw Dewey was a movie where he didn't really feel like himself. He was run down. He was sad. He was an alcoholic. He was not living his best life. And that's our last memory of him. So we're never going to get to have that Scream 7 moment where we reunite with him in the way that we did with Sidney and Gale in the best, fullest way. So I know that was a big, long thing, but Ash, any thoughts?
No, I completely agree with you, and especially what you were saying about Dewey just now, that just like made me sad. But I it did, like I was just that's just so heartbreaking. And I love what you said about Sydney and Gale. And I think like this song could also be a Sydney and Gale song of like them like kind of like reuniting and like they're going on the investigation again, and at the end they're kind of like they have like their bickering. Because like in the song she says like we can fight, like we fight like brothers. And I feel like she would kind of look at Gail as, I don't know if she'd look at her as a sister, but as somebody who isn't just a friend. You can't describe it with a word sometimes because there isn't one. And like there isn't a word for, oh, this is the woman that I've survived multiple ghost face attacks from. Like there isn't a word that is like tangible, right? That you can just use to like let someone the significance of how important this person is to you. This song could be really beautiful because there's one lyric in particular where they talk about which talks about parachute, and I feel like they're kind of each other's like parachute throughout the scariness and all of the things that they just really count on each other. And if I want to make everybody cry when they listen to the song, the one thing that like just like I was like, nope, I can't do this is people are putting this to the song are using this song to make videos of their pets that are no longer with us and be like, it's like you go to heaven and you get to reunite with your pet for the first time. I was like, stop it.
No lie, I've literally thought of my dog Tarzan. Like Tarzan was the dog. He was a little white Westie. I got him on my 4th birthday, and he lived through basically I was done with college. And I've thought about this song in the context of him, and like because like the song is like about like owner and toy, and in a way like not that we're the owner and a toy with a dog, but it's a similar kind of relationship in a way. And I've thought about my dog Tarzan constantly when listening to it. It's Tarzan, my grandpa. Those are yeah, exactly. It's a ding.
Yeah, all of those things that you've lost or people when you get to like reunite with people. Like some of my favorite videos to watch online are people reuniting, especially like it's like my friend flew to like come to my wedding even though like I didn't think she could because she lives like across the world or something and we haven't seen each other in 6 years or whatever. And watching like I'm gonna start crying watching people just like reunite with like their loved ones when they haven't been able to see them in forever is so sweet and beautiful, and I love it so much. And this song just like makes you feel all the feels in a good way.
I agree. Well, let's go through some lyrics here, which I'm going to tie to Scream Baby. Let's do it. Okay, so the song starts out in typical Taylor Swift fashion for writing with the imagery and the specificity of the portrait she's painting. So she says, I knew you through the days of the blades of the grass in summer, blah, 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 blah. And then she goes on to say, life has ways of leaving those days behind, but seeing you tonight. And then she goes into the chorus. I remembered I loved you, came back when it mattered. I saw you standing there in the light of the window, wearing that same smile. Man, it's been a while, but I knew it. I knew you. Ash, what are your thoughts on the way the song kicks off and this chorus?
Yeah, I love like 'cause it's like I knew you through the days of the blades of summer, and it's like days, like DAZE. What do
Yes,
you say? Z?
the days.
I was like, I don't know what you guys say, Z or you say Z, I think, of the grass of summer. And then like later when she's like, but life has a way of leaving those days behind. I
Yeah.
just love how, and then like the next lyric when she says parachutes for the free fall of being younger is one of my favorites, but I also thought it was pair of shoes for a second. I was like, what? And I was like, that can't be it. And then I looked it up. But I was like, I guess like it could be because like she's talking about like bare feet footsteps. And I was like, what? That doesn't make sense. But it's like, oh, parachutes. And I've seen a lot of people talking about how a specific connection really, and like your friends really are those like parachutes of you kind of like understanding. And I picture like the army men, those like things that you would throw off at the balcony and they'd have like a parachute on them of like playing with those. Like big a Toy Stories reference here, but it's just so like this feels like childhood in a way, and I don't know how she does it.
Well, and like for me, like childhood was so wrapped up into Scream. Like from the time I was in 6th grade through 12th grade, Scream was such a huge part of my growing up experience and my life with my sister and my bond and like my family and my hobby and like what I did and spent my time doing. So, it's so interesting. So I just want to put everyone through the lens of Scream and Sidney Prescott. So life has ways of leaving those days behind. Okay. We were kind of left behind with Sidney first after Scream 4, that long hiatus, and then after Scream 5, when the franchise kind of moved on without her. But seeing you tonight, the night we saw Scream 7, or the night that Sidney came back to us, I remembered I loved you, came back when it mattered. Sidney came back when it mattered, when the franchise was at a low post, Melissa. And then this, I saw you sitting there in the light of the window wearing that same smile. Man, it's been a while. And that is how I see Sidney whenever she's smiling at Mark and smiling in the coffee shop. And it's just the same glow. It's the same girl. It's the girl that we know from way back when, recovered and happy. And she's put her life together and created a beautiful life with children and a family and, a business and purpose. And she's not afraid. It's Sidney. It's how I see Sidney.
She just has this way of like wrapping up all of the feelings we have for her in her smile.
My two favorite parts of the song are these next two things. And one of them is from like the post chorus and one of them is from the bridge. So I'm just going to put them together here because I have a Scream argument. So, okay. So she says, I watched you drive around the bend for what I thought would be the last time I saw my friend, but love has ways of bringing things back to life. All you said was hi. ... Oh, the rivers I cried when we said goodbye, wondering if I had made it up in my mind. But now you look me in the eye. And then she repeats the chorus. Like, I literally have goosebumps just reading those lines out loud. And I love the way that Jack Antonoff makes the instruments and the production around these two parts, where it's like, da, 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 but just in terms of like a Scream perspective, I know this sounds ridiculous, but we're driving around the bend of Scream 5 and at the end in the epilogue where she's talking to Sam, and it's like I kind of thought that's the last time we saw Sidney, the last time I saw my friend. But love has ways of bringing things back to life. She was brought back to life with Scream 7, and in fact, she brought Scream back to life with Scream 7. I just love this line. The rivers I cried when we said goodbye, wondering if I'd made it up in my mind, but now you look me in the eye. And I just love that line because it's so true about like having to leave somebody behind or like, part ways, even temporarily. Because like you do kind of wonder, was that all just made up? It's just like, it's so elusive, it's so far away. But then once you reunite with the person, it's like no time has passed. In a way, that's how I felt with Sidney. I've talked about it, like, that opening weekend, I felt such peace watching Scream 7. I was just like, wow, this is how life is supposed to be.
I don't think I could say it better, but if anybody's a big Taylor fan and loves the Eras tour, because we didn't know back when everything got canceled and the world shut down and Taylor had a concert, like a Loverfest got canceled because of the pandemic. And the first thing that Taylor says to the crowd is, hi. All I had to do was say hi. And I was like, I think that maybe this could like be a little bit like of a love to fans also, this song of her saying just like, all I had to do was say hi and you guys you were just back with me right away.
Oh.
And I think that's kind of like Sydney. Like Sydney could have just started being like, hi, like to whoever it was, like to Tatum or whoever it is. And we would have just been sitting in the seats, googly eyed, like staring at her the same way that I would be staring at Taylor.
Yeah.
Just so excited to see her.
It all connects, baby. Ash, is there anything else you'd like to share about I Knew It, I Knew You, our final big new Taylor song of season 5 before the hiatus?
I don't think so. This song makes me excited for what could potentially come down the road and from Taylor. And I will say something that I think is pretty cute is that Taylor has like publicly talked about how much she loves Toy Story for a long time. And how it's her favorite movies. I don't know if you saw her on like the red carpet asking the creators and different people in the cast to sign her like VH copy of Toy Story from when she was a little kid. And so I just feel like it's like TS yeah, it just makes sense. And to all the people who told me I was crazy that she was doing something with Toy Story, haha, I was right.
Agreed. Agreed. Well, Ash, thank you so much. Please tell everybody where they can find you and our game of the week on Thursdays.
So you can find me at Squirrel and Spud 9. There you'll find all my ramblings of all the different things I like and pictures of my cat. But most importantly, the Scream game of the week, which is really fun. I like to stump all of you or see what your answers are. We love seeing your answers. Honestly, it's so fun. I have a blast making them. So please participate and let me know which ones you like or if there's anything you want to see. We're definitely open to doing what you guys are into. So thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Ash. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this segment of Scream with Ryan C. Showers. I'm your host, Ryan C. Showers. Thank you for joining me. I am sitting here with one of my favorite people in the world. She is a admin of the podcast with me. She helps me manage my Instagram group, and she's just also very resourceful when it comes to Scream and Buffy. You actually last heard her on the episode for Sarah Michelle Gellar back at the beginning of April, I believe, where we talked about the news of the Buffy cancellation. So everyone, please welcome my friend, Sarah Campbell. Hey, Sarah.
Hey Ryan, thanks for having me.
It feels weird because like you were on post Scream 7, but we weren't talking about Scream 7. Yet this came after years of talking about the potential of Scream 7. So I'm happy to have you on to actually discuss what your thoughts are on the finished product that we got in theaters a couple of months ago.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Do you see a difference in your opinion from like February 28th when you first saw it through now?
It took me a couple watches, kind of just reinforced my thoughts. The parts that I really liked, I love now, and the parts that I wasn't so hot on maybe annoy me a little more now.
No, okay. So it's like extreme in each direction. That's interesting. So I guess like where we should start is what is your updated ranking?
Yeah, so it before Scream 7, it was release order. Now it's 1, 2, 3, 4/7, 5, 6. All I was hoping for was it was at least on par with 4, and for me it was, so I was happy.
Cool. Well, why don't you tell me what did you like about it first?
Yeah, I liked a lot of things, and to be clear, it's probably gonna sound like I'm getting negative near the end, so it's good that we start with the positives, but I loved the first 2 acts. So, I love Gale and Sydney's relationship, the whole arc, everything about it. I thought it was perfect, I thought it was executed perfectly, it's probably one of my favorite parts of this movie. I also liked that it was a mature storyline, that we focused really more on the adults than the kids, which is what I wanted.
Mm.
Love Mark and Sydney's dynamic together. Them as a family is great. Speaking of Gale, I love the inclusion of Chad and Mindy as like Gale's kind of little proteges. I liked Chad and Mindy more in this movie than I did in 5 and 6. I liked the trio together. I thought it worked. I thought they were more likable. I thought it was great. I liked that it wasn't completely focused on them. I think we got like just enough.
Mhm.
It was a really fun opening scene. I loved the Mocker House opening. I think it was an improvement on the shrine from 6. I like that it was like a little museum. It was like nostalgic. And that was another thing I liked about the movie. I know a lot of people were complaining that it was like fan service, but like I'm a fan. I want to see that stuff. So I loved like the nostalgic set pieces, the vibes, the music, the score, like that scene of them, enforcing the curfew, Red Red Hands playing. Like, I loved all of that. And I have some issues with Tatum, but for the most part, I liked her arc and her growth and her relationship with Sydney. I don't know. I just thought this one was like fresh and fun.
Well, that's awesome. So let's kind of like dig in there. I love that you started out with Sydney and Gale because I mean that is where the heart of a lot of Scream fans are. Especially like if you have been a fan since '96 and you've really kind of lived each of these movies and like gone on this journey. I feel like it's impossible not to have an affinity for Sydney and Gale, let alone their relationship. And so whenever they come in Scream 7 and it is like the heartbeat of Scream 7 in a lot of ways, and at least you mentioned like the 2 acts. I feel like Act 2 is so focused on Sydney and Gale. I think, if Act 1, you can kind of look at it as like the Sydney and Tatum act, and then Act 2 is like the Sydney and Gale act.
I completely agree. I think they needed that because we were missing it. Well, we were missing it completely in 6, but we also didn't really get it in 5. Like we were teased, right? We got their little reunion at the hospital, which was very nice. But then it felt kind of rushed. Like this movie felt like their relationship. We saw a lot more into it. And I really liked how if you're a fan of the whole franchise, you'll probably notice this, but it's like the first movie they hated each other. The second movie they knew of each other, but, it was like, "Be kind, she saved our lives," but they were not friends. The third was, like, that awkward hug in Kincaid's office. Fourth is, "How you doing at the bookstore?" Five is, first the first true, genuine, hug, and then in seven, it's they're almost running towards each other, right? Right after she hits him, it's like this great big embrace, and it's like, "Oh, finally." Like,
Yeah.
it was like a payoff almost.
No, I completely agree, but also even within, I love that how you mapped out the arc of them over the 30 years, but, even to take it further, within this movie, there are peaks and valleys to their relationship. It's not a straightforward thing, and I think that, the more I reflect on this, it's very true to life, it's true to these characters. They could have done what Scream 5 did, which was, I mean, I agree with what you said about the tease. I think the tease comes into play because I don't think that they give us the full Sydney and Gale, the realism. Versus here, they show how kind of like with family members, where you guys have such a deep bond that your different interests will clash. And even though you do clash, that doesn't mean the bond isn't still there. And we see them, disagree a lot, in addition to really being there in loving ways for each other. What are your thoughts?
I totally agree, because it's like, they're happy to see each other, and then they're having a really serious conversation about, their lives, and then they're kind of more joyful kind of in the middle, but then Gail pushes it too far with the interview, and then at the end, it's the realization that, Sydney does trust her, she could always trust her, they've always had each other's backs, and it just kind of, yeah, cements their relationship. I loved it. It is probably my favorite part of the movie.
What did you think of the interview scene in terms of the perspectives of Sydney and Gale?
Yeah, I sympathized with Sydney a little more. It was very Gale back in the 1 and 2, right? She was pushing it a little far with, repeatedly asking about Tatum, but that also kind of moved the story forward, so, I get why they did that, but I also get why Gale would do that. That's very true to her character, right? She's always pushing, always digging, so, it made sense, but yeah, I was a little bit like, "Okay, come on, Gale. Just Sydney's throwing you this bone after 30 years."
Well, so let's move on now to Sydney and Tatum. You mentioned some hesitancy with Tatum, but overall positive vibes. So why don't you tell me about what did you think of Isabel May and introducing Sydney's daughter? Because it's a huge thing to introduce the daughter of Sydney Prescott. So what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I love her as an actress. I was excited when she was cast. I think it makes sense based on what she's been in before. I felt that she would be a good fit anyway. I liked their relationship. Tatum as a character, there were some things that she did that annoyed me, but I have to keep reminding myself she has not experienced this kind of life before. She is very sheltered, she would be freaking out. And it was just the little things, when they're in the safe room in the closet and she's like, "No, no, no, you can't leave me, take me with you." I'm like, "No, girl, stay there, be smart." Or when she's, in the office after she shoots him through the wall and she starts to leave, and I'm like, Why would you leave? You should stay there." But I'm thinking, again, she's a teenager, she has not experienced this. Sydney has not exposed her to any of this. Of course, she would be terrified. So, it was just, little quirks like that, but I guess you can get frustrated with any character doing what you would consider stupid stuff, but yeah, I just had to keep reminding myself, even though she's Sydney's daughter and we expect her to be, this badass, it's like Sydney specifically hid this from her, so of course she would be soft.
Right.
And I
What
think that sets up a good arc for her if her story continues, we could see how she grows.
Yeah, no, and I think that's exactly the intention, right? Is to um ease into Tatum. And so I guess my next question it plays into that is what did you think of her personality? Were you surprised by her personality and why?
No, Again, I was annoyed with her being a little timid, but they made that a story point, so that made sense, but the defiance makes sense. Even though Sydney as, a teen maybe wasn't, you really saw her kind of grow into her stronger personality by 3, so that kind of reminded me of Tatum.
Yeah. So what did you think of Sydney overall? Were you pleased with her? Did it feel like this was the movie that we wanted from Sydney all along? The characterization, having not been in 6, barely being in 5. What are your thoughts?
It made sense where she, landed after not seeing her for a movie. I'm like,
Mhm.
"Yeah, she was already living this life in 5, we just never saw it." It made sense to me. She wasn't Laurie Strode in 2018. She wasn't completely on the defensive all the time. It's like she had a life, she had her friends, she had her family, but she was obviously, very protective of Tatum. She wasn't, guns blazing until she had to be. So, I think it was done perfectly. I have minor gripes with specifically, her dialogue and Gail's dialogue. We can get into it later. I thought maybe some of the dialogue wasn't written so well, but I think their characters were perfect.
In terms of like describing Sydney's life, what did you think of the setting, the atmosphere? Was it what you imagined it would be, based off of like the build up from Scream 5 to here? Or was it better than what you were expecting to be in terms of the town where she lived and just seeing her normal life and seeing the coffee shop and what her life is like now?
Yeah, it's what I expected. Like, I don't see her living in a big city, right? She's gonna live in a small town. She's gonna try to be private. It's probably gonna be similar to, where she grew up, but also kind of where she landed in 3. Like, she's always been kind of outside of the main city. It was really nice. I ended up really liking it. It did really remind me of Woodsboro, unlike 5, which was supposed to be Woodsboro. This
Right.
actually felt like a small town. Like, when you see the girls, like, walking to school, I'm like, "Yeah, that could be a subdivision where I live." Like, it all just worked really well. Again, that curfew scene going down the main street, like, it was perfect. I had the warm and fuzzies.
Well, you mentioned Mark and Joel McHale's character. So, what? Tell me about Mark and Sydney's husband and how you think that their marriage was portrayed. And do we have any regrets about Patrick Dempsey?
Mark is my almost probably yeah, Mark might be my favorite character besides, the OGs. Like,
Nice.
he knocked it out of the park. I'm not gonna lie, I was a hater since day 1 when it was, like, announced that it wasn't gonna be Kincaid. I was
Mhm.
like, "Why are we having another Mark?" Like,
Yeah.
I was so mad, and then when they cast him, I was, like, hesitant. I was like, "I've seen him in stuff, but, like, he's always a little goofy," and I'm like, "I don't know if Sydney would go for goofy."
Right.
And then I was like, "If you're trying to be goofy, are you trying to be dewy?" And I don't know. I was not excited. And then he made me eat my words. I loved him. I thought the relationship was perfect. He was just, like, silly enough that you could see him bring out, like, the silly side in Sydney, like, when they have that first scene, like, in the bed together. But I also love that they truly were, like, a partnership. My favorite scene in the whole movie is the initial Ghostface fight in their house, like, with Carl and the family.
Yeah.
Like, when he's fighting, she kicks him the knife, like, when he goes down, she takes over. When he's getting beat up, she rips out the little mailbox, like, it was a perfect little tag team. I love them together. I think it worked well together, and I really wanna see more of them.
You know what I like about that scene too? I like there's almost like an unspoken language between the family members, specifically Mark and Sydney, and how they kind of, you, as you described, kind of tag team Ghostface. But like, I also just love that scene. I feel like it feels very realistic. Like, whenever I see Sydney kicking ass, I don't see it as like unrealistic or forced in any way. It just feels very much like Sydney Prescott doing her thing, as opposed to like sometimes where in like Scream 6, it felt like Sam was almost like this like supercharged like action hero, and I just don't feel like that. It felt so grounded in the way that Sydney was fighting Ghostface in that moment and the way that she and Mark were working together to fight him. Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100%. Like, she's not well, she swung a brick at the end, but, like, she's not swinging bricks and, like, jumping off things and throwing people off banisters, like, she's, like, kneeing him in the stomach. She hit him with a pole, like, it's very realistic, but, like, effective because she's had 30 years of this.
Right. Yeah, no, I think it's great. And that's honestly, I think as people like reflect on Scream 7, whether people grow to love the movie overall, like the people who didn't like the movie this right out the gate, whether they grow to appreciate the film or not, I think that this sequence at the house, from the time they arrive through, what we were just describing with Sydney and Mark, through the wall, through Gail Weathers coming, I think that's gonna be seen as like the masterpiece segment of the film.
Yeah, I would agree.
So you also mentioned the twins, which I'm really happy to hear because that's we share that opinion so strongly. Like I just feel like this is the best version of them, and I guess I want to know like why do you think that is? Why do you think that they work better here in a movie without Sam and Tara, in a movie that a lot of people were unsure of? Like, do they even fit in Sydney's world? Do they fit in Gail's world? What are your thoughts?
I can't exactly put my finger on, like, why I like them more, except that it's the writing. Like, it was like their personalities were a little different. Like, I found Mindy a little, like, over the top and preachy in 5 and 6, but in this one, when she's, in the bar with them and she's explaining rules and giving the history, like, I found that entertaining. Like, it was just
Yeah.
written a little better, maybe because their story wasn't centered around just, like, Sam and Tara. and they actually had, like, a purpose with Gale, and they weren't in, like, immediate peril all of the time. We kinda got to know their personalities a little better as just those 2 together versus them interacting with, like, a whole bunch of other people and, like, being the the friend group, They were just peripheral characters, and I just think it worked better.
I think that you're hitting what you just said at the end there. I think that hits the bullseye. I think the difference is and why they work better here. Specifically Mindy. I think Chad works fine in 6. I think, but here he's different. The reason I like Chad here more is like we actually get to see Chad. We don't just get to see Mason Gooding being romantic and charming and beautiful. We actually get to see his personality and like that comes out through the sibling dynamic, right? So I think that's why Chad is better or why he feels a little more natural and flowy here. But with Mindy, I think it's because she isn't a part of the friend group. She, at the bar when she's going through all the suspects, they're outsiders coming in and just evaluating strangers. And I think that makes her and her shtick, it makes it make more sense as opposed to like, the people in your life, like your friend group, pointing fingers at like the people that you spend every day with, like, oh, you're a killer. Like, so I think that's part of it. But I also think what you said about the writing with Mindy, it really is the key. I think like there's just something in both the writing meeting Kevin's directing that just makes Jasmine's performance so charming, so likable. I think that also the purpose aspect, the fact that she has her own storyline about wanting to kind of follow in Gail's footsteps, that also endears us a little bit more to her to see that they're actually doing something relevant and important as opposed to just kind of like hanging out with Sam and Tara, if that makes sense.
100%. Chad's always likable, but Mindy is so much more likable in this movie. And not to say that like all females have to be likable in movies, but like her personality was abrasive in the first 2, and that's weird if you want to root for someone. So I liked them a lot in this.
Well, and I think that like her shtick just works better here. Like, the whole, oh, it's about nostalgia. And I think it's also the being self-aware that like she should stop, but she can't stop. You know what I mean? I just think that there
Yeah.
is something a little bit cute about that in terms of like, yeah, of course, women don't have to be likable, but I think they achieved that here with like what the character they were going for. So, um, okay, well, Sarah, you mentioned you have positives and negatives. So let's talk. What didn't you like about the movie? And for instance, I want to start with the dialogue that you alluded to about Sydney and Gale.
Yeah, it's just little things. Like I felt it got better with Gale as the movie progressed, but at the beginning it was like a lot of one-liners and like semi callbacks and like little punches that were kind of like, okay, can you give her like a couple sentences in a row? Like she pops out and she goes, "Did I get him?"
Yeah.
And it reminds me of that scene from Buffy with the big post and she's stabbing the demon and she's going, "Did I get him? Did I get him?" That's all I can think about when I hear this. But it's like, "Did I get him? Let's unmask this fucker." Like she always has to say fucker in like every movie. And it's just like her first couple lines were just like that. I'm like, are we only giving Gail sound bites in this? But then I would say pretty much after her and Sydney got the phone call with Stu, then she kind of opened up and her dialogue got better.
Mhm.
And yeah, it was the same almost the opposite with Sydney. She had a lot more natural dialogue at the beginning, and then at the end, it was almost like, lines you could clip about, "That's my prime, my ass." And it was just like, do you know what I mean? I don't know if I'm explaining this well. It just some stuff was really soundbitey, and it's like they were trying to make a punchy line, but it came off a little cringy.
Well, no, I think with Gail, they were trying to do a lot in that first sequence. They were really trying to make her feel like the Gail of say Scream 1 or plus Scream 4, I would say. Like those two, like that same energetic person who's like outside of Sydney's house, like banging on Tatum's window, yelling at Kenny. That plus like the energy she brings with Judy Hicks or say the boys in the cinema club in Scream 4. I think they were trying to achieve that. And for me, it worked. Like, the one-liners, I found them funny, and I think giving Gail all of those funny moments and those punchy moments up front to get that part of Gail out of the way so that we could do the more human Gail, the investigation Gail with Sydney later on, I think was a good choice. I do see your point in this because I have heard from people who said, "Holy crap, she said the F word like a million times within one scene." So I understand where you're coming from. For me, it worked. With Sydney, in terms of like saying past my prime, fuck you. A lot of people love that line, and I definitely do.
They're not egregious, it's just like the first time I probably loved it, but it's like upon repeated watches, it just kind of gets a little like, "Okay, there's that line again." But again, nothing that ruins anything about their performances, it's just like little nitpicks.
What are your other issues?
Honestly, there's only two, really, but they're kind of big. I'll start with the mystery aspect of it. I did feel that it was a little weak in this one, just because there wasn't really any good red herrings at all. You kind of pegged who you thought the killers were, and it
Mhm.
didn't really change over the course of the movie. And even with the inclusion of like the AI, you were still pretty sure you knew what was going on. Like, they didn't even really throw much suspicion at, like, the friend group. You knew it was, like, a combination of adults. So, maybe in this movie it was okay because your main focus was on the, like, is it or isn't stew, but I just felt that, yeah, there was kind of a lot of characters, we didn't really get to know them a lot, which didn't help the mystery aspect.
So, this is an interesting point. So I see mystery in like several different ways. So there's like the one
Mhm.
aspect where it's like the idea of Fallbrook and like Sydney and Gale, like they unmask this first ghost face. They don't know who he is, so they go and investigate his past. And like I do think that there is some skill in like almost distracting us with this, like making it seem like could this guy be Stu? And like the little plausibilities that Marco kind of throws to them, and like the way that these pieces kind of line up to make a reasonable case that he could be alive. Yeah, I don't believe Sidney ever thought he was alive, but what how I see that and like how the mystery is kind of like rerouted and like what's really going on is like they're so focused on is Stu alive? We're going to check out this mental hospital, not realizing that the mental hospital does in fact play into the overall killers at the end with Jessica being there, Marco and Carl. So I like that aspect of it. In terms of like the ghost face of it all, I would agree that it's not Scream 1 or 2 in term or Scream 3. Scream 3 has a lot of great suspects. Scream 7, so the suspects would have been, I guess, Ben. I think Lucas is probably like the main red herring. They have the drama teacher. You could count Robbie Rivers. And I guess Jessica if you squint. I don't think they try to make her a suspect. And I think this kind of comes down to the casting. Some fans, whenever the big actors cast, we just assume that it's going to be in a camp, right? So I see your point. I think that the mystery aspect works a little better for me. Like for instance, I love the scene with Sydney at the ambulance and looking out into the crowd and like seeing the drama teacher and seeing Ben and like
Mhm.
having her suspicions. I thought that was a really fresh approach to looking at the suspects. But yeah, what did you think of Lucas as a suspect?
I liked Lucas. I never really considered him. I felt like they were pushing hard, calling him like, "Oh, the creepy boy, the creepy boy." I'm like, "Do you want us to think that it's him? Because it's clearly not." Like, I never really pictured him as a suspect. Also, the drama teacher was so over the top. I was like, "We didn't need to include him at all." It's like either make him a red herring or like, why did we have him? Just to tell Tatum that he's sad she's not a fighter like her mom. Like, he was probably the only character that I actually just didn't like. I didn't see the point in him, but I also really liked that scene of her looking out into the crowd. It reminded me of 4 after the Olivia. It's like all the ambulance there, and she's kind of like looking around at people.
The lack of character development for the new cast is and like the friend group, it has been something that has been stated as a flaw for people overall. But I think with that, you get the great work with the main characters, the Sydney and Gale, the twins, Mark and
Mhm.
Tatum. So that's a trade-off that I'm willing to take. But I definitely see how that could be a flaw for you. So you said two. What is I know where you're going, but please share with everybody why you didn't like the finale and the killers.
Yeah, my biggest gripe is the Jessica of it all. Like, I was fine with the ending until Jessica's like reveal and rant. Because here's the thing, I know people have a problem with Marco. I don't at all. There's always been some random killer along for the ride or they want to do it just to do it. Like, not everybody needs like a direct link back to the past. Like, there's always like a sidekick one, which I also say shout out to Carl. Loved Carl. Loved that it was completely random. Love Chad's line of, "But it's always somebody we know." Like, I liked that it wasn't like, that was fun for me. So him and Marco, no qualms. It's Jessica's motive that goes a little off the rails for me and how it's revealed in her whole spiel about how, like, Tatum is gonna watch this. Like, it was almost like incoherent rambling. I really didn't like it. I think that there could have been a really good motive for Jessica. I liked the idea that she had been kind of stalking Sydney and was watching her, and that this killer, maybe like Mindy was saying, isn't really obsessed with like Ghostface and killing. They were obsessed with Sydney. Like, they could have fleshed something out about that was really great. But
Mhm.
having it in the same storyline of the is it or isn't stew was just too much and it was very disconnected. I think they should have picked a lane and I wouldn't have had the issues.
Well, so that's interesting, especially what you just said at the end there about like the stew of it all and like the way that that is used and like almost like perhaps not so complimentary to Jessica's motive and like the what the finale is talking about, which is this parasocial relationship that crazy people sometimes have with famous people, and then like this lack of media literacy. Like Jessica was so obsessed with Out of Darkness, but she missed the point of it. She thought the point of it was that Sydney, her purpose was just to kill the bad guy, but she missed the forest through the trees there of what the book was actually trying to say. Does that match up with the AI stew? I think that there is an argument to be made that perhaps that they aren't complementary with each other, and I can understand how that they don't blend whenever we're building up with stew the whole time, and then Jessica's motive happens. So I understand.
Yeah, that is really only the main issue for me. Like, I could forgive everything else, right? I overall really enjoy this movie. I gave it like a 6 or 7 out of 10. It's just that reveal at the end where it felt like they couldn't pick a lane.
Okay.
Like, do the is it or isn't stew and have the motive be like stew related, stew obsessed, whatever, or go full parasocial. I just, for my personal opinion, the blending of the two didn't mix. Um,
Hmm.
I whether Stu is dead or alive, I'm not in one of those camps either way, but I really enjoy the inclusion of him and the like baiting her with it essentially. So if he was or wasn't alive and it was still the main storyline, I would have been happy. Or if there was no inclusion of that and it was just parasocial relationships, I would have been happy. But for me, it just didn't blend, and that's just how I feel.
So, Sarah, I get the frustration that you may have with the idea of, the stew of it all not adding up with the Jessica of it all. But I think what is missing here in this discourse is they use the stew of it all to talk about the culture, to talk about AI, to talk about how this affects Sydney. Like, yeah, Sydney's been scared a million times on the phone. She's also been scared with the voice changer in Scream 3. But now we're seeing a physical manifestation of that because of the technology. And it really shakes her in a way that she hasn't been shaken in a long time, right? Because Scream 5, it's the I'm bored. So I think the AI was important on that front. Also, I think it makes sense with like the way that Stu has this cult internet following. Thematically, it all makes sense to me. And it links up to the opening, of course. The AI is kind of used to make Sydney question the reality of the facts of her life. And I think that's really important in a way to kind of discombobulate her, to take her off of her normal speed and her normal strength. What I see in the finale and why they use the Sue of it all, it's like a distraction. It's like a shiny object to distract the audience from what's really going on. And it's so brilliant the way that Kevin Williamson introduces the mental hospital as the thing underneath. They go to the mental hospital because of Carl, because of the stew connection. And then when they're there, Marco pushes the stew of it onto them and pushes the idea forward that he could be alive, the plausibility of him being alive. So that's what we're focused on. But all the while, the real reason we're there is to introduce the mental hospital, to introduce Hi Marco to Carl, and then of course set up Jessica's eventual thing. So I actually think that it's very crafty the way that Kevin does that, and not tricks the audience, but lulls us into submission with the stew of it all to allow what's really going on to be hidden in plain sight. So that's interesting. I want to kind of go back to your ranking now because you said 4/7. If you had to pick between 4 and 7 right now, which would you pick and why?
If I have to pick right now, gut instinct, it's 4 because Dewey is my favorite character, and I think you knew that.
I kind of did. I figured you would pick 4, but I was just curious because of the way you talked so fondly about like the build up to the finale. So one last question here, Dewey, what did you think of seeing David Arquette again here? Was this what you were expecting? And first of all, were you spoiled about like how he would be used, or what are your thoughts on that montage?
Yeah, so I wasn't spoiled on it, like, we knew he was gonna be in there, and we were kind of just going back and forth on, is it gonna be a video or is it just gonna be a voice? So I did like seeing him again, even though it made me really sad. That is my only other nitpick is the AI could age a little poorly over time, even though it is super relevant now.
Yeah.
The video at the end, I know some people thought it was a little cringy. I would have liked, if it wasn't completely Stu centric, if she were to get a phone call from all these different deceased characters, that would have been cool. Like, I didn't mind seeing them. Just yeah, David's made me sad, but that's my only worry is that it's gonna age a little poorly over time. But at the same time, I don't think the voice changer from 3 aged poorly, so maybe this is me just trying to hate both sides.
Well, I think that the AI could actually age better than what we expect, just because it's still such an unknown thing. I don't know. I think it's possible that it ages nicely. So we'll have to see.
Yeah.
Well, Sarah, is there anything else you'd like to share about Scream 7 or anything before we sign off?
Just that it has made me more excited for 8. Previously, I will say a lot of people, if you listen to this podcast, know I'm not the biggest fan of 5 and 6. So I really haven't been excited about a Scream movie since we heard 5 was coming out.
Mhm.
And then since then, I've been either a little bummed or a little cautious or a little nervous, especially not knowing what 7 is going to be. But now that I've seen 7, I'm very excited for 8 and the future of the franchise.
Well, that makes me happy. And like to me, that was like the big thing for you was like, is this going to be the movie that finally turns things around and makes Sarah excited about Scream again? Because it was sad to hear you so down about things after 5 and then after 6, So I think that Scream 7 and Sydney did their job in terms of, turning around the ship for fans like you.
100%.
Well, Sarah, thank you so much for coming. Please tell everybody where they can find you online.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I am on Instagram. It's my name, Sarah Campbell. It's SAR.Campbell.
Awesome. Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to this segment of Scream with Ryan C. Showers. I, of course, am your host, Ryan C. Showers, and joining me for this discussion is my friend Alex. Hey, Alex.
Hello, Ryan. I want to say I appreciate you having me on here for a one-on-one interview, exclusive interview.
Yes, of course. So no, I'm dying to hear your thoughts on Scream 7. There's a very fun story behind me and Alex. Alex and I have a very interesting relationship as it pertains to my patrons. Of everybody in my group, I feel like Alex is the biggest, most pro Scream 6 person, on average, I would say. At least the people who are like really engaged in like the day-to-day chat. And, I beat up on Scream 6 a lot. And Alex, he sits here and he takes it, man. So, but that being said, Alex joined the Patreon after the events kind of transpired in like 2023 2024, and there's a very interesting story about when why Alex joined and like when he started to get excited for Scream 7, that I really cherish. He said that it was after the episode 150 where me and Josh and TJ talked about the news about Nev and Kevin and kind of how, I'm paraphrasing here, but Alex said that like he kind of saw there is life after the radio silence era. There is stuff to look forward to. So now here we are, all these years later, all these episodes later, with the movie of Scream 7. So Alex, I have to ask, did the wait, did the anticipation, did it live up to the hype for you?
I would say it exceeded my expectations.
Oh yeah.
Because there was, I mean, even the week it was about to come out, there was that still doubt in back of my head that this may not deliver the goods because it is the seventh installment. There's that fear, if you're a fan of like long-running horror franchises, they drop the ball eventually somewhere, whether it be early on or halfway through or whatever. But I thought Kevin and company, they knew what they were doing, despite the negative reviews, which I had no idea I had negative reviews until after I saw the movie the first time on IMAX. And when I literally checked, I was curious, like, what's the Rotten Tomatoes score? I haven't seen anything. And when I saw, I was like, my jaw dropped. I was like, what?
So it doesn't make sense, right? It just like
No.
what we're seeing. It's like almost like we're in the Twilight Zone or we're being gaslit or something. Like the movie that plays out in front of our eyes does not match what the critics delivered us. And like Alex, I don't know if you agree with me about on this, but like I have this theory that like when like critics like I don't think that they're as powerful as they think they are, but I do think that critics sometimes they set the tone for and they kind of outline the structure of how people receive movies, even like people who don't care about critics' reviews. When the first person starts out by saying, "Oh, this is the best thing ever," or "It's the worst thing ever," that kind of programs people as they go into it, being like, "Oh, this got really good reviews. I'm looking at this in a positive way." So I'm watching. It's like, "Oh, this is good. This is good." I'm talking myself into it, and vice versa. And I think that's always what's happened with Scream 3 is like the reputation almost like precedes it to kind of like put it in people's minds that this is the worst. So when you're watching
Mhm.
it, you're like, oh, well, I can see why this is the worst. This is the worst. This is so bad. It's like it's like a self fulfilling prophecy in a way, and I fear like that's what happened with Scream 7 and like the audience members who don't like it. But I genuinely think and I see like the real life people who don't subscribe to what the critics were saying, and who also think it's crazy like we do. But go on.
I mean, that's funny you mentioned Scream 3 because that was the other problem I was gonna bring up was that we've been here before with this franchise, where there was
Yeah.
installments that got really trashed by critics at the time it was released, but we as fans, we still enjoyed it, you know? Back then, I didn't never pay attention to reviews at all. That wasn't a thing in my brain, you know,
Yeah.
till, I got on social media more. I think, I don't think it matters anymore what critics say, they become more irrelevant, in a way. I'm not saying that as a disrespect because I do have I do have at least 1 or 2 friends who are critics, and I respect their opinions, see, but I mean, as a whole, like, people will watch what they wanna watch, and people will like what they're gonna like. Okay, look at what's going on right now, not just Scream 7, but also the Super Mario Galaxy movie. Got really
Yeah.
bad reviews. Didn't matter, the movie, people went in droves. The Michael Jackson biopic movie, another example.
I feel like the Michael Jackson is even like the bigger example of it because that was
Oh,
such a big thing and the reviews were so terrible. And
mhm,
the discourse was so terrible. And like, you say, I don't mean to be disrespectful. Perhaps I do in a way, like with
mhm.
critics, because I find it, because I lived in that world. I know that they're kind of catty and they can play games and be malicious. And like,
Right, and
I,
they certain agendas and
so,
stuff like that, yeah. I mean,
but
we do see it with what they say in the reviews, which is so odd to me. I can't speak about the Michael Jackson movie because I haven't seen it, but I'll speak on the Super Mario Galaxy and definitely Scream 7 because I've seen those movies, and I don't see where it's offensively bad, even if find the weak links of the movies of those movies.
And can I just say 30% on Rotten Tomatoes, that is vicious. Like that is
Yeah.
like beyond the pale. And I just like there are so many things about Scream 7 that you could like individually look at, whether that be Nev's performance, whether that be Nev and Isabel together, like Sydney and Tatum, Sydney and Gail, McKenna Grace's death scene individually, the opening individually, the set piece at the house, at Sydney's
Yes.
house, the interview, like if you isolate these things and then you say, and this is what they gave 30%, it's just it doesn't add
Yeah.
up to reality.
Yeah. I mean, the only thing on just first viewing that I felt like, "Ooh, maybe that 30% might be justified," was the 3rd act because I did have issues, but it worked for me on 2nd and 3rd viewing, that 3rd act,
Mhm.
especially the killer reveal, which a lot of people, even people who like the movie, have issues with that. I can
Yeah.
see why, but
Mhm.
I think people missed the monologue. It did go over my head the first viewing because I was like, "Huh?" I think we've been too focused about guessing who the killer is. Oh, it's gotta be that person. It's gotta be that. On first viewing, we do this
Mhm.
for first screen movies because we wanna guess it right? And when the 3rd act was starting up, I already had guessed what the killers were. Not because someone spoiled it for me, because I see where this is going. Like, I pay attention.
So can we do let's just go there. So the third act, it's interesting that you kind of felt it was flawed or you could see how
Mhm,
some could perceive it as flawed. And then
mhm,
as the viewings have gone on for you, you've grown to love it. And that's been like in my experience, that's been most people, especially like people who are like plugged in, like especially like Scream fans. Like the more you watch Scream 7, I think it only increases in stock value, but especially the finale. Like I think it's just something you have to kind of get used to and understand in that way. So tell me about it. What did you think of the finale?
Well, I really liked Anna Camp's performance when she's revealed to be the killer. People can nitpick and say, "Oh well, there's no way she could have done all those killings." Like, well, come on, like, come on, guys, like, are we still doing this? These
Yeah, right.
criticisms, or like, who's strong enough? What character strong enough to do some Ghostface killings? Like, suspend your disbelief at this point, man. But for me, it's all about the performance and the dialogue of the monologue. Where like, I got it. Like, it really quick clicked with me that second viewing about her obsession with Sydney, not the celebrity Sydney, whereas all these other past ghost faces have been have been obsessed with Sydney, the character of the stab movies, the stab
Mhm.
fanatics being killers. Jessica was not a stab fanatic like that. She was a fan of the real person.
Bringing the book back was really smart in my opinion, and it
Mhm,
also it kind of like legitimizes Scream 4 in a real way, and I think it kind of makes like Scream 7 and Scream 4 they're like spiritually linked, like the original trilogy
mhm.
was, you know?
Yeah, and, I thought it made sense where, like, yeah, even someone who's a positive role model, like a Sydney Prescott or Sydney Evans, yeah, when she wrote that book, it was a positive book, yet it would still attract a negative person. It happens all the time, and I felt that Anna Kent's performance sold that.
What did you think of the idea and the concept of the parasocial aspect and like kind of like what the film was going for by having these randos, Marco being someone we only met in one scene.
Mhm.
Sydney didn't even really know his name. I know
Right.
and it's a joke because she didn't know Roman's name either, whatever. But
Yeah.
and Carl and somebody that Sydney just shared a glance with, like this creeper guy stalking her at work.
And Carl didn't have a single line of dialogue,
Yeah.
which is interesting. It didn't bother me. When it comes to Carl, because I liked the fact that we finally get to see a Ghostface be defeated halfway through the movie. The Ghostface that was part of the plot. I mentioned on the chat, Scream 6 opening because they did that, but that's its own thing, and I do like that opening. And speaking of Scream 6, I would say that had the opposite effect on me with the third act, where I loved it so much the first time I saw it, opening night, but it's gone down for me and, multiple viewings, whereas Scream 7's third act has gone up, and that's
That's
why
great.
spoiler alert, that's why I put 7 above 6. It was hard for me, but, I have to analyze it fairly in my own head. But to go back to your question, I see why it bothers people that Markle wasn't really fleshed out, but I only give it a pass because Ethan Embry's performance was really good and throughout the whole movie. The limited time he's in there, I enjoyed his performance. Yeah, sure, fine. I mean, that's still one flaw for me in the third act still is that it's a predictable reveal. It doesn't like ruin the film for me because that's not the first time we've had a predictable reveal in the series.
When you say predictable reveal, you meaning just like the identity of who the person is that's taking off the mask. Cool.
Yes, Marco's being, obviously because we saw him and he was saying obvious lies about what he knows about Stu, and once he said that it was a John Doe, I was like, he's the killer. Like that's immediately when I think most people guessed
Yeah.
he was the killer, and oh well. I mean, he still gave a good performance. I still
Yeah.
thought he was menacing in his reveal scene.
Well, that's great. So, what did you think of like the final fight with Sydney and Jessica and everything that entails with Jessica as part of the finale? Like setting aside like the epilogue, we can talk about the epilogue in a minute, but
Right. I thought it was entertaining, but the thing is, like, that's another flaw where did feel it was too short. Where we're so used to s- uh, s- the reveals of all the Scream movies being pretty lengthy,
right.
even when there is, especially when there are multiple killers, which is most of the franchise anyway. But even something like Roman, the single Ghostface killer in Scream 3, he had a lengthy monologue himself. Um,
Yeah.
for obvious reasons, but I
Mhm.
felt like maybe an extra 5 minutes in the
Yeah.
reveal would have helped,
Mhm.
but I don't think it hurts it in the overall scheme of things.
So, Alex, where do you place Scream 7 in your ranking? What is your updated ranking?
I was my updated ranking, Scream 1, Scream 2, then Scream 7 as of
Mm,
now, then Scream 6, Scream 5, Scream 4, and Scream 3.
I
But,
like it.
thank you. But, I do feel like, I am it might change after I rewatch all of them again once I get Scream 7 on Blu-ray.
So, what does that mean? Like, whether could Scream 7 go up more, or do you think it's going to go down, or are you talking about the other films?
The other films, some of them might switch up, double down on my rankings all the time, but I'm not a stranger to changing rankings.
Honestly, me neither. I've been very fluid with my rankings since Scream 7 came out. I was like, I'm just going to throw Scream 2 under the bus, and now I feel pretty guilty about that. Alex, I know you're a Scream 6 fan, but
Yes.
in a lot of ways, I find a lot of the strengths of Scream 7 to be what we were missing in Scream 6. Would you say that's a fair statement?
That's fair sin if you obviously, if you like Sydney's character and let's say you're not a fan of Salmon and Tara. Well, the Gale criticisms in Scream 6, I always felt those were fair.
Yeah.
I always felt like, okay, that's not wrong. You guys are not wrong about that. I mean, it did regress the character, which
Yeah.
that's one of the things one of the flaws I do have with Scream 6. When it
Mm,
comes to the twins, this is where I go like, hey, come on, guys, like, or like I object. Where like I always liked them, like
yeah.
I liked them in Scream. I loved them in Scream 6, and if I felt like, well, I was ahead of the curve on that one because you guys all of a sudden love Mindy and Chad and Scream 7 now, even though they're limited.
Do you see them in 7 as different as they were in 5 and 6? Or do you think that there's just they were written exactly the same, performed the same way, no difference?
I definitely feel some maturity with them
Okay.
compared to Scream 5 and 6, but, they still get I mean, they still need to learn how to not get, attacked. I mean, they didn't get brutally attacked like last time, like in
Yeah.
Scream 6, and that's something I do wanna cover,
Okay,
if
go
you
ahead.
don't mind. I know, again, Scream 6 criticisms, a lot of them are fair, and a lot of them I do agree with. One of the big ones, besides the Gale thing, was everybody survived. All the surviving cast
Okay.
member got survived again. Well, and that happened again in Scream 7, and it didn't. I didn't see, or maybe not as much as negative feedback. I'll say from the Patreon group. Felt like where it felt like, um, well, why didn't you guys criticize that as much?
You
I
want
know,
me to answer on behalf
yeah,
of the Patreon of Scream with Ryan
or you could
Showers?
just answer on behalf of yourself. It's fine with me.
Well, so here's what I would say to that because you're right in the sense that one could look at this because of the way that we talked about the lack of survivor deaths in Scream 6. Like, let's flash back like a year ago, 2 years ago. The temperature around this was really high. I think Scream 7, it is so beyond what Scream 7 is trying to do. Like, I find that the focus of Scream 7 and like the direction of Scream 7 and the emphasis and what it chooses to emphasize and the vibe and the tone is not gunning for the survivors, if that makes sense. And so here's what I would say. Okay, first of all, we have 4 survivors in Scream 7. In
Mhm.
Scream 6, we had 6. So that's literally, so that's 2 more. That's going from having 6 of 6 survive is different in my opinion than 4 of 4 survive. Second, the biggest difference, Alex, is the 4 survivors in Scream 7, they are not put in life and death situations to the extent, to the degree they aren't given death scenes like the characters in Scream 6 are. Like if you look at like literally, Gail, Kirby, and each of the twins, especially each of the twins,
Mhm.
and even Tara to an extent, the way that she gets stabbed up in the finale, they all get pseudo quasi death scenes, but then they
Mhm.
magically survive. And that is not present here. Gail doesn't even have an attack scene. Whenever she kills the ghost face, she's using her car. And Mindy and Chad, they are stabbed so superficially and slashed. I mean, they're barely attacked. They're just not the focus of Ghostface here. Scream 7 didn't put down the card on the table, be like, I'm going to try to do this, but then take it back. Versus what Scream 6 did, which is they did it with everybody. You know what I mean? They gave Chad and Mindy, and they took advantage of all the opportunities of a death scene for survivors, but then magically let everybody survive. That's the difference, I think.
Okay, I hear you. I hear you. The only really character in Scream 7 that got that kind of moment was Mark.
Well, it was Mark, but I will say I think that the way that Kevin films his scene, I think that it's very cool in the sense that like we get his point of view and like the sheets involved, so we don't really see what's going on. Versus in Scream 6, where Mindy gets stabbed literally in the abdomen, Chad gets stabbed a million times. So we see Chad getting stabbed a million times, and we see that effect. Whereas here with Mark, it's kind of obscured and we don't really know exactly where he was stabbed or how he was stabbed. And like, I think with Mark, it was just played out a little bit better, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I see what you mean. Well, for the record, I don't. It doesn't bother me where
Yeah.
they survive, and however many times they get stabbed. I understand why people got frustrated with Scream 6 in that regard. I will say I did like the fact that you got to see the wounds affect them this time
Yeah.
around. Even though they got slashed once, the twins like they get out of the car at the end and they're clearly in pain. They can barely even move. And Gale still has the effects of Scream 6. Appreciate that Kevin Williamson put that in there, or maybe you could say Guy Busey put that in there a whole lot. That's another thing I did want to talk about just for briefly. I did mention that in the chat a couple like a week ago or so that I need to defend Guy Busey a bit here because he's still getting credit for the script here, and most of us have praised Scream 7 and the story and everything, but everyone seems to give Kevin Williamson the only credit here. But I was like, well, Guy did come up with the AI storyline, which we all loved, and I thought it worked. I didn't think I'm not. I was that was another thing I wasn't sure of. Like, ooh, AI, touchy subject, but I thought it was done very well for both Kevin's direction and the script.
So I will say this, you know what, Guy Busick, like I think that you did a great job with Scream 7. And I guess the reason why people are still kind of shitting on Guy Busick is because Kevin Williamson did come out with the top credit of the writing. So I think a lot of us in our minds think Kevin did a lot of the cleanup work. But at the same time, it's wrong. Scream 7 is my second favorite behind Scream 3. So Guy Busick deserves my respect. So I'll say it right here. Guy Busick, thank you for writing Scream 7. You did a fabulous job. And thank you for letting Kevin Williamson help collaborate on the script. Really, really loved what you did with Sydney. So
And that's on record, guys.
it's on record. Guy
Ryan
Busick,
said.
love you.
It's like you patted him on the back, like, "Well done, guy. You proved me wrong, finally." Yeah, I understand, or you can see maybe the weak parts of the writing in Scream 5 and 6 were for James Vanderbilt. I mean, we don't have a list of who writes what.
Can I give a hot take? I think James Vanderbilt's actually the worst of the 2. I think Guy Busick has good instincts, and I think that he perhaps writes dialogue a little bit better than James Vanderbilt. I think that James Vanderbilt has, terrible instincts. So, Alex, what else did you love about Scream 7? Tell me about Sydney, tell me about Tatum.
Oh yeah, I mean we haven't gotten to the main course about Screen 7. Absolutely loved the mother daughter dynamic in this one. A lot of people have compared it to Halloween 2018. I felt it was more Halloween H2O
Oh,
actually
yeah?
to me. In this one you have a mother child. Same with H2O, where in Halloween 2018 you had mother child grandchild.
Yeah.
Uh, you had that extension here, and I really was surprised by Isabel May.
Oh, yeah?
That's something that's a character where I wasn't familiar with her work, so I don't know how good she was until I saw this movie. She really brought something new and interesting as that character, and they worked really well together. I did believe they were mother and daughter, and they have this
Cool.
history. Yeah, this is one criticism I don't understand at all, where people have bitched about, "Oh, how come she didn't teach her about fight Ghostface?" Like, did you guys not see the point of
Yeah.
Sydney's role? She's moved on from Ghostface stuff. It's
Mhm.
not really moving on if she told her every single thing that happened to her and she prepared her to shoot guns and all that stuff that we saw in Halloween 2018. That's why I feel it's more comparable to a show where she didn't really. She said she told John, Laurie told John in H2O about Michael and everything, but she didn't really prepare him like that.
Yeah, and I think that you're absolutely right in that, and I think that, it's such an interesting choice to make to give Sydney this deciding factor with Tatum as opposed to, doing the Laurie Strode thing. I think that was really smart.
Yeah, because someone like Sydney would want her children to live normal lives. Why would
Yeah.
she live in recluse like that? She owns a coffee shop. She has a normal job. She has a husband. It seems they do have a stable family. And
Yeah.
that's something like, I actually loved about, because we're so used to it in horror films where it's a broken family for whatever reason, divorced parents and everything. This was kind of refreshing, I thought.
No, it was refreshing and also very true to Sydney Prescott, very
Yeah.
much what she would do, even if we didn't know that's what she would do. Oh.
Yes, and speaking of the family stuff, like, I another character I was totally surprised by was Mark Evans.
Yeah?
I had my doubts too, because I was like, I don't know, the continuity stuff with Mark and Cade and everything, but I ended up liking Mark Evans more than Mark and Cade. So I'm glad Patrick Dempsey couldn't do it. I thought the chemistry
That
this time around was stronger.
Yeah, good. Well, I'm
Yes,
glad to hear that.
yes,
I mean, I'm happy that like we ended up in a good place for people because
yes.
I loved Patrick Dempsey and I wanted that to work out. It didn't, but I'm happy with what we got here too.
Yeah, I did too. I mean, I'm glad he survived too, because I was like, "Oh, no," like, I remember we talked about when the trailer first came out, I was like, "Oh, they kinda spoiled his, death scene, and that was his death scene," but it wasn't, so that's how much we know. We don't know anything. We think we know everything, but we don't until we finally see the movie.
What I was famous for in that time was people coming to me and I'd be like, "Oh my god, they spoiled Mark's death," and I'm like, "Did they? Did they really? Did
Right.
they?" So it's funny. I'm glad that he survived as well. I think and here's the thing, kind of going back to what we were talking about earlier with the survivor deaths. I think like here it makes sense that Sydney's family stays intact. Because
Mhm.
of the standalone nature, and like the uncertain future. In Scream 6, because of the way that was building toward a third chapter, I guess there was more of an expectation for someone big to die, especially when you had so many survivors, versus here, where it's hard for Sydney to have a happily ever after if her husband's dead. You know, I think that that's also. I want to ask you about Gail Weathers, and what did you
Yeah.
think of her return here?
Absolutely loved it. I absolutely loved her entrance. Took me by
Yeah,
surprise, like most people, because you're thinking, "Oh, she's gonna probably enter." Obviously, we kinda had the feeling she was gonna come into the story, into the movie after Sydney's first attack, and that's what kinda happened, but she was already on the way.
yeah,
And she floored that shit to run down poor little Carl, which I thought was a great crowd moment for her.
yeah,
And for the twins as well, when they show up at the same time. And I will say I like your kind of theory you talked about the twins. I know we're talking about real, but about the twins where we're like, we kind of finally see them talk just by themselves. And I think that's where I can see, okay, I can see why you guys think, or you, Ryan, you think they were held back a bit in Scream 5 and 6.
yeah.
They don't have anybody else. They don't have the friend group here, the core four recipes. The core four. Well, no, who knows? That might come back later. But yeah, about they. It's like the chemistry is getting even stronger with Jasmine and Mason. I love their role in this one.
Isn't it funny? You were like, I was like, so tell me about Gail, Alex. And Alex was like, well, let me be the Scream 6 person and I'll just divert the attention from Gail Weathers to the twins in the core four. Like,
Because they get introduced at the same time. I mean, can you blame me?
I'm just teasing. It's just
Yeah.
like you're a Scream 6 person, you pull a Scream 6. What are you gonna do?
Yeah, someone's gonna talk some positivity when it comes to Scream 6 here. Or Chainsaw, I know you don't like that, but oh well. But no, Gail, I loved her role in this one, where we finally saw her what she feels, how she really feels about Dewey being dead. We didn't really get to see that in Scream 6, which again, that's a fair criticism. And I thought Courtney Cox always delivers a great performance as that character. I will say I was surprised that she didn't get an attack scene, because we're so used to that. I have a feeling, we just saw her get attacked so badly in Scream 6. That's probably a creative choice. Like, let's give her a little bit of a break.
Yeah.
You know?
I think so too, but also they make it relevant and they make her
Mhm.
injuries part of that and like why it makes sense that she's not attacked. I think that like to choose between another attack scene versus what they did do, which is the story, the relationship with Sydney and like the consequences and like who she is today, they made the right
Mhm.
choice.
Yeah, and again, she still has that great chemistry with Nev Campbell when they investigate together. Like, okay, she's despite her screen time being limited, Kevin still put her character. She had an importance to the plot. Of course, every Gale fan appreciates that. You don't want her to be lost in the sauce.
Well, she has the third highest screen time after our two leading ladies, the first time since Scream 4.
I definitely felt like she had more screen time compared to 6.
Yeah,
Because she's popping in and out in Scream 6, where here, like, okay, the whole middle section, she's in and out a lot bit.
she's totally. Well, Alex, what did you think of the opening?
I really love the opening. I think there was great use of suspense and tension there on Kevin's part. He finally got to do some Halloween homaging and some Jaws stuff, tribute to Jaws as a director. Which, like, okay, since he's not coming back for Scream 8, and we don't know when he's gonna ever direct another movie again. I felt it was very important for him, as a fan of those movies, those movies that made him a horror fan, to put that in there as a
Yeah.
director. Like, I love that, and I really like the 2 actors who played the boyfriend girlfriend in the opening, the whole Airbnb. Like, and that's another thing where the opening got a lot of criticism because they were doing that meta stuff like, "Oh, this is when this character died and this happened in the other movie." Well, it's a Airbnb of the staff films plus Scream films. That's what people do. That's what fans do when they go visit the sets, the Stu Macher house. They take
Yeah.
pictures like that. Like, all that stuff is like, it clicked with me. Like, okay, it worked. Whereas, like, I'll throw some shade at another horror film, Halloween Kills. They did that a lot in Halloween Kills, where, like, "Oh, the time when Michael Myers killed his sister?" How many times do we have to how do you guys have to reference that? And whereas, like, in Scream 7's opening, it worked because it was a
Mm,
meta,
right.
conversation.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. Well, so what is your favorite sequence in the film?
Actually, one of my favorite sequences was actually that emotional moment with, Sydney and Tatum had on the phone, where Ghostface is trying to get into the office, and then she has the gun, and she's telling her, like, "I'm not like you, mom. I'm not strong." And I was like, "Yes, you are. You are like me." Like that. Oh, tear in my eye when I first saw it. Like, it was so good. And props to Isabel May for giving a good performance in that scene, because emotional scenes in horror movies is tough to do. It can
Mhm.
come off very cheesy at times.
Yeah.
It's still a slasher film, but the Scream franchise has had its plenty of great acting throughout the years. So I'm
Yeah.
glad she was able to deliver something. It's a lot of pressure. I mean, we're talking about a franchise that has Nev Campbell and Courtney Cox giving great performances, and here comes this new girl that she's got to keep up, and I thought she did well.
You gave Tatum, Isabel May, I should say, the nickname Gail gives Sam. Hey, what's your tone, new girl?
Yeah. So I'm excited to see where the story takes Tatum
Yeah,
for
me too.
Screaming. I mean, who knows? It could go darker. It could go, I don't know. Poor girl lost her friend.
And that's a great place to be, and I'm sorry. I love this aspect of her character. Like, she's truly like inhabiting like the essence of like the final girl now, being
Mhm.
being the sole survivor, like truly of her friend group and of this new generation. Like she truly is like the solo final girl in a way that we have never really seen in Scream because Sydney's always been with Gail and Dewey and whomever else. So I love it.
I will say this is it's funny because she wore the jacket, Sydney's jacket bit of Scream 2. She kind of
Yeah.
she's in that place where Sidney was in Scream 2, where she lost all her group of friends.
Yeah. I guess
That
that's
was
Scream
same area.
2.
Yeah, that's why I thought like, oh damn. Like I actually thought maybe one of her friends would survive, or maybe even Ben, her boyfriend, will be the only survivor of the friend group. But damn, they actually kind of surprised. Like, oh, this is a weird thing. Speaking of the friend group, where I felt like yes, they weren't developed enough. I wish I would have got to know more about them, especially since they all died. But I think all of the actors who played the friends, they were all good. There wasn't a bad performance in this movie. I didn't feel there was a single bad performance in this movie.
I concur, and I actually think that like the friend group, like the new young teens, are kind of underrated. I think they're getting a really bad rep because of a lack of screen time. But I think that the characters are better drawn and better explained than they're given credit for. So
I agree, and I think when it comes to the boyfriend character, I thought this was the best one in a while, actually. I mean,
cool.
the innocent boyfriends, the ones
Yeah.
that were not killers. I thought this was a huge step up from Danny from Scream 6. I even liked Ben better than Trevor. I've never been that big of a Trevor guy. I mean, Ben, sorry, you're no Jerry O'Connell, but who is, who is? Derek's still my favorite innocent boyfriend character.
Alex, thank you for coming. Is there any final thoughts you have that you want to share about Scream 7? And please tell everybody where they can find you online.
I can't wait to keep to watch this 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times on Blu-ray. So I also it's gonna be fun to binge watch them again. So look out for ranking changes possibly. But you can find me on Instagram, AlexLGrand90, where I hang out in the chat at the Patreon chat, or you can just find me on YouTube if you want to watch 3-4 hour streams. Yeah, I do once in a while. You can find me Alex 3.0. Thank you.
Everybody, thank you so much.
All copyrighted material used or referenced in this show belong to their rightful owners and made possible by the Fair Use Act.
And number 3, never, ever, ever, under any circumstances say, I'll be right back. Because you won't be back.
Get another beer, you want one?
Yeah, sure.
I'll be right back!
Dear God, Ryan,